My daughter put down her fork and looked me in the eye. She said, "You should have died before Dad." That sentence did not just break the heart of a 58-year-old mother. It dragged a web of secrets and insurance money into the light. When I realized she was planning to put me in a nursing home to steal my house and pension, I knew this was not about forgiveness anymore. It was about revenge. My name is Marilyn Brooks. I am 58 years old. And tonight, the silence in my kitchen is loud enough to shatter glass. I had just finished a double shift at Argent Shore Analytics, analyzing spreadsheets until my eyes burned, only to come home to the suffocating quiet of Maple Ridge, Ohio. This town pretends to be peaceful, but behind the manicured hedges and white fences, things rot just like anywhere else. We were sitting at the dinner table. The roast chicken was dry, and the mashed potatoes had gone cold because Hannah refused to sit down until the news segment ended. I poured myself a glass of red wine that cost $9 a bottle, trying to wash away the metallic taste of fatigue. On the small television counter, the anchor was talking about a pileup on the interstate. It was a cruel coincidence. Exactly 1 year ago today, Robert died on a stretch of road just like that. Hannah did not seem to care about the anniversary. She poked at her chicken with a look of pure disgust. "Do you know how much the electric bill was this month?" Hannah asked without looking at me. "You leave the lights on in the garage all night. It is wasteful." "I just forget sometimes." "Hannah?" I said softly. "You forget a lot of things," she snapped. "Just like you forgot how much Dad's hospital bills crippled us before the accident. If we had that money now, I would not be stuck in this dead-end town. Noah, who is 10, and Lily, who is 8, stopped eating." They looked back and forth between us like terrified spectators at a tennis match. The air was so thick with tension that I felt sick. "Noah," I said, forcing a smile that felt like a grimace. "How was that math test? Did you get the B plus you wanted?" Hannah slammed her fork down. The sound rang out like a gunshot. She stared at me, her eyes dark with a resentment that must have been fermenting for years. "Stop pretending everything is fine," Hannah said. Her voice was dangerously calm. "You act like a saint because you work those extra hours. But we both know the truth." "What are you talking about?" I asked. Hannah leaned forward. "You should have died before Dad." The world stopped. The hum of the refrigerator, the chatter of the television, the cars passing on the street outside, it all vanished. I felt a physical blow to my chest, as if an invisible fist had punched through my ribs and squeezed my heart. "If you died first," Hannah continued, her voice trembling slightly, not with sadness, but with cold rage, "my life would be different. Dad would have known how to handle the money. He would have left me something real." I could not breathe. My own daughter looked at me as if I were a mistake that needed correcting. Hannah stood up and wiped her mouth with a napkin. Casual as could be. "Kids, clear the table. Grandma is not hungry anymore." She walked into her bedroom and shut the door. I sat there, paralyzed, staring at the congealed gravy on my plate. I looked up at Robert's picture on the wall. His smile seemed distant, mocking. Hannah's words were not an outburst of anger. They sounded like a verdict she had reached a long time ago. I went to bed, but stared at the ceiling for hours. Around 2 a.m, I woke up to a sound. The walls in this house are paper thin. I heard Hannah's voice from her room. She was on the phone. "Don't worry," Hannah whispered. I held my breath to listen. The next step is proving she isn't competent. I have the forms ready. When the papers are done, the house and the pension are ours. Robert's hands were rough like sandpaper, but he held our daughter like she was made of glass. That was the contradiction of my husband. He was a machinist, a man who smelled of oil and metal shavings, who worked 60-hour weeks so we could pay the mortgage on this drafty house in Maple Ridge. We spent decades balancing checkbooks at the kitchen table, arguing softly over health insurance premiums and the rising cost of Hannah's college tuition. We were tired, but we were steady. Hannah never appreciated the sweat, even as a teenager. She looked at our life with disdain. I remember her standing in the living room, screaming because she could not go on a spring break trip with her wealthy friends. "You guys only know how to work," she had yelled, her face red with entitlement. "You don't know how to live." I always stepped between them. I shielded her from Robert's disappointment. "She is just young." "Robert," I would tell him, "she wants more than we had." Then came the silence. 1 year ago, Robert died in a car crash on his way home from the factory. The police report was short. It said he lost control due to fatigue. They called it an unexpected accident. That classification was important because it meant the life insurance policy from Horizon Harbor Mutual would pay out in full. I remember the day the agent came to our house. He was a young man in a cheap suit who could not look me in the eye. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, shuffling papers on his lap. "Robert voluntarily changed the primary beneficiary to Hannah 2 weeks before he passed. He left you a small stipend, but 80% of the payout goes to your daughter." I felt the floor drop out from under me. Hannah had thrown her arms around me, sobbing into my shoulder. "Mom, Daddy did this for my future." She cried, clutching my blouse. "He knew you were almost retired and you don't need much anymore. Please understand." I swallowed the bile in my throat. I told myself Robert must have had a reason. I told myself he wanted to protect his little girl. But money changes the texture of grief. Once the check cleared, Hannah changed. The thrift store jeans were replaced by designer dresses. She started coming home late, smelling of expensive perfume. Then Clay Mercer appeared. He was a man in his 30s with a smile that showed too many teeth. He called himself a financial startup entrepreneur. He sat at our dinner table and spoke in buzzwords. "It is all about leverage, Marilyn," he would say, swirling my cheap wine in his glass. "Financial freedom is a mindset." I never trusted him. One evening, I heard them arguing in the hallway. Clay's voice was low and urgent. "Don't let the old lady control the assets," he hissed. "We need to move to Lakeside City. The market is hot there." When I confronted Hannah about moving or his comments, she waved it off. "He just speaks impulsively," she said. But whenever I asked about our long-term budget, she turned vicious. She deflected her guilt onto me. "Stop nagging me," she would scream. "This is why we were always poor. Because you are afraid to spend a dime." Her words chipped away at me, making me feel small and burdensome. But tonight, the sadness has been replaced by a cold clarity. I sat in the dark garage, the air smelling of stale gasoline and dust. Robert's old sedan was parked in the corner, covered in a grey sheet. I stared at the outline of the car. For the first time, the official story felt wrong. Fatigue, loss of control, just an accident. I ran my hand over the dusty hood. A question I had been too afraid to ask for a year finally surfaced in my mind. Was it really just bad luck? Or was there something else hiding in the shadows of that night? I crept back toward the kitchen in the dark, my feet silent on the linoleum floor. I only wanted a glass of water for my headache. But the hushed voice drifting from the living room stopped me cold. Hannah was on the phone, her back turned to me, the blue light of the screen illuminating her profile. Golden Pines. Nursing home? Hannah said, her voice low and businesslike. Yes. The incapacity file is being prepared. We are looking at full financial guardianship. I froze. The words hung in the air like smoke. My own daughter was discussing my freedom as if it were a transaction. I retreated into the shadows of the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs. A moment later, I heard Hannah say goodbye and head toward the bathroom. The sound of the shower turning on was my signal. It was a risk. But the fear had been replaced by a cold, sharp need to know the truth. I walked into the living room and saw her leather handbag sitting on the counter. My hands were trembling, but I forced them to work. I unzipped the bag. Inside, buried under a makeup kit and a wallet, was a thick manila envelope. I pulled it out and opened it under the dim light of the stove hood. The first document was a petition to the court. The legal language was dense, but one sentence jumped out at me. It claimed that Marilyn Brooks displays severe signs of cognitive decline and is unfit to manage her assets. I gasped, covering my mouth to stifle the sound. At the bottom of the page, I saw a signature, Dr. Evans. He had been our family doctor for 20 years, but I had not seen him in 6 months, and certainly never for a mental evaluation. The signature looked shaky. Was it forged, or had Clay and Hannah bought him off? I flipped the page. There was a glossy brochure for Golden Pines, a place that looked more like a prison than a home. Clipped to it was a property appraisal for this house. My house. The home Robert and I had spent 25 years paying off. The appraisal was dated 3 days ago. Hannah was planning to sell it the moment the lock turned on my room at the nursing home. Then I found the smoking gun. It was a bank statement from Summit Crest Bank. The account was titled The Hannah Brooks and Clay Mercer Trust. I looked at the balance. It was exactly the same amount as Robert's life insurance payout. They had not just spent the money, they had pooled it together to build a life that excluded me entirely. I reached into my robe pocket and pulled out my old smartphone. My fingers felt clumsy, but I managed to open the camera. Click. I took a photo of the guardianship petition. Click. The forged medical statement. Click. The bank statement. I was terrified, my pulse roaring in my ears, but a strange survival instinct had taken over. I was not a mother looking at her child anymore. I was a witness collecting evidence at a crime scene. Suddenly, the water in the bathroom stopped. I shoved the papers back into the envelope, stuffed it into her bag, and zipped it shut. I ran to the sofa and threw a blanket over my legs, closing my eyes just as the bathroom door opened. I heard Hannah's footsteps approach. She paused near the sofa. I kept my breathing steady, though my chest felt tight enough to burst. I heard the soft tap-tap-tap of her typing on her phone. Then, she whispered a voice message. "Everything is nearly done," she murmured, her voice dripping with impatience. The signing date just depends on her being confused enough for the judge to believe it. I lay there long after she went to her room, staring into the darkness, tears leaking from the corners of my eyes. The next morning, the kitchen smelled of fresh coffee. Hannah was standing by the pot, smiling as I walked in. It was a bright, plastic smile that did not reach her eyes. "Good morning, Mom," she said, pouring a mug and handing it to me. "How are your joints today? You seemed so disoriented last night. Maybe we should look at a place where you can get more help, a place with professional care." I took the mug. The ceramic was warm, but her words were ice. Every question was a trap. She was not asking because she cared. She was building her case. "I am fine, Hannah," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Just tired." An hour later, Hannah packed Noah and Lily into the car for school. She waved goodbye, acting the part of the perfect daughter. As soon as her car turned the corner, I moved. I went to my bedroom and pulled a small duffel bag from the closet. I did not pack much, just 3 changes of clothes, my toiletries, my pension book, and my identification. I looked around the room I had shared with Robert. I could not stay here. If I stayed, I would become the senile old woman she wanted me to be. I zipped the bag shut and walked to the front door. I took one last look at the hallway where my grandchildren's height marks were penciled on the wall. I was leaving the only home I had known for half my life. But as I stepped out into the cool morning air, I made a silent vow. I would not come back here as a victim. I would come back to burn their plan to the ground. I drove to Lakeside City in a daze. The skyline was a jagged row of glass and steel teeth biting into the grey sky. I parked my car and walked into the satellite office of Argent Shore Analytics, the company where I had spent years crunching numbers before I was transferred to the smaller branch. I needed to see Denise. She was an old friend who had moved up to human resources, and she was the only person who might break the rules for me. When I found her in her cubicle, she looked nervous. She kept glancing at the open door. "Marilyn, I really should not be doing this," Denise whispered, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "If corporate finds out I accessed a deceased employee's closed file without a warrant, please." "Denise," I said, leaning over her desk. "I just need to understand why he left me with nothing." The printer whirred. Denise handed me a warm sheet of paper. It was a copy of the change of beneficiary form. I stared at the date. It was signed exactly 2 weeks before the crash. Robert had authorized a change, allocating 80% of the payout to Hannah Brooks, leaving me with a pittance. But it was the signature at the bottom that made my blood run cold. Under the line for witness, written in a sharp, aggressive scrawl, was the name Clay Mercer. I felt dizzy. Hannah had told me she met Clay at a networking event 3 months after the funeral. She said he was new to town. But here was his name, dated before Robert died. He was not a stranger. He had been there. "There is one more thing," Denise said softly. She turned her monitor so I could see. "Look at this archived email thread. Robert sent a message to our benefits department 3 days before he died. I read the subject line inquiry regarding spouse protection. The body of the email was short and desperate. 'If something happens to me, will my wife be okay?' I am not sure I understood the new terms correctly." No one answered him. Denise said, her voice shaking. "His account was deactivated the day after the crash. It was marked as resolved." I left the office with the papers tucked inside my jacket, my heart pounding a rhythm of pure panic. But I was not done. I drove to the outskirts of the city, to a greasy, cluttered garage called Frank's Auto. Frank had been fixing Robert's cars for 20 years. He wiped his oil-stained hands on a rag when he saw me. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, nodding respectfully. "I haven't seen you since, well, since the service. Frank, I need to ask you about the car, I said. The police said it was a mechanical failure combined with driver error. But did you see the car before the crash? Frank looked down at his boots. He chewed on his lip, looking like a man burdened by a secret. I was going to call you, Frank said, his voice rough. About a week before the accident, a guy brought Robert's sedan in. Slick guy. Expensive suit. Said he was a friend of the family and wanted to check the brakes as a favor to Robert. Was his name Clay? I asked. He didn't give a name, Frank said. He paid cash, $300. He told me not to write up a ticket because it was a surprise gift. But here is the thing. Mrs. Brooks, after he left, I checked the work. One of the caliper bolts was replaced with a size that was just a hair too small. It would hold for a while, but with enough vibration, it would fail. I finished, my voice barely a whisper. I replaced it, Frank said quickly. I put the right bolt in because I thought the new kid in my shop made a mistake. But then, 2 months later, my office was broken into. They didn't take the cash register. They took the hard drives for the security cameras. The footage of that guy bringing the car in is gone. I walked out of the garage and sat in my car for a long time. The pieces were coming together, and the picture was horrifying. It was not just greed. It was a script. The life insurance was the first act. The guardianship and the house were the second. And Clay Mercer was the director, using my husband's trust and my daughter's avarice as his tools. I drove to a cheap motel on the edge of the highway. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner. I sat on the lumpy mattress and spread everything out: the beneficiary form, the bank statement, the guardianship petition, and the notes from Frank. It was a map of destruction. They had turned Robert into a paycheck and me into a liability. I looked at the photo of Hannah and me from her graduation that I kept in my wallet. I took it out and placed it next to Clay's signature. If they want to erase me from their lives, I said to the empty room, my voice trembling with a new, dark power, then I will erase the life they built on my husband's blood. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the contact in my phone. Rafael Martinez. To most people in Maple Ridge, he was just the old man who grew prize-winning tomatoes and complained about the squirrels. But I knew him as the retired detective who had spent 30 years in the Major Crimes Division. I dialed his number. Marilyn, his voice rasped over the line. Everything all right? You haven't asked for my zucchini bread recipe, so I assume it is trouble. It is worse than trouble. Rafe, I said. I need you to look at something. I just emailed you some photos. There was a silence on the line, followed by the clicking of a computer mouse. I waited, listening to the hum of the air conditioner. Madre de Dios, Rafael muttered. Marilyn, this is not just a family dispute. This is fraud. Forging a medical signature, moving insurance assets before a death. This has the smell of a federal offense. Can you help me? I asked, my voice cracking. I am coming to pick you up, he said firmly. We are going to see a friend of mine. An hour later, we were sitting in a small, cluttered office at the Brightline Legal Group. Across the desk sat Tessa King. She looked young enough to be my granddaughter, with messy hair and tired eyes. At first, she looked at me with the polite skepticism of someone who deals with paranoid seniors all day. Mrs. Brooks, Tessa said, tapping her pen on the desk. Guardianship is a complex process. Usually, families do it out of love, to protect. Look at the bank statement, Tessa, Raphael interrupted. And look at the date on the beneficiary change form. Tessa picked up the papers. Her eyes widened as she scanned the documents I had stolen from Hannah's bag. She stopped, tapping her pen. This signature from Dr. Evans? Tessa said, looking up at me. You never saw him for a cognitive evaluation? Never? I said. Tessa leaned back, her expression hardening. Okay. Let me explain what they are trying to do. If the court grants Hannah full guardianship, you become a ghost in the eyes of the law. She can sell your house, liquidate your pension, and put you in a facility without your consent. You would lose the right to hire a lawyer or even access your own bank account. It is a civil death. I felt a chill go through me. She wants to bury me while I am still breathing. To beat them, we need more than suspicion, Raphael said, leaning forward. We need a chain of evidence. We need to prove Clay Mercer manipulated the insurance policy and that Hannah is knowingly participating in the fraud. Tessa turned to her computer and started typing furiously. I had a feeling about that name. Mercer? Give me a second. She pulled up a screen filled with business registrations. Here we go, Tessa said. Clay Mercer is listed as the director for Everline Apex Holdings and Mercer Growth Labs. These are shell companies. I see dozens of complaints on consumer protection forums. Elderly people investing their retirement savings and then, poof, the money vanishes. He is a predator, I whispered. And Robert was just another mark. And Hannah is his gateway to your assets, Raphael added grimly. We can't just sue them, Tessa said, looking at us with intensity. They will claim the documents are real and that you are just confused. We need a confession, or at least undeniable proof of their intent. How do we get that, I asked. Tessa took a deep breath. We set a trap. You have to go back to them. Marilyn, you have to pretend that you are accepting the guardianship. You have to play the part of the frail, confused mother who is ready to give up. You want me to walk back into the lion's den, I asked. Yes, Tessa said. But this time, you will be wearing a wire. We need to record them admitting to the plan. We need Clay to explain the financial setup. And we need Hannah to agree to it on tape. I reached into my purse and pulled out a picture of Noah and Lily. I looked at their innocent faces. If I did nothing, their inheritance, their home, and their grandmother would be stolen by a man who saw us all as numbers on a spreadsheet. I will do it, I said. If I have to play the fool to save my family, I will give the performance of a lifetime. Tessa handed me a piece of paper with a script typed in large, bold letters. We were sitting in the small conference room at Brightline Legal Group, the air conditioner humming a low, steady note. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from the adrenaline of the lie I was about to tell. Remember, Marilyn, Tessa said, her voice soft but firm. You are not the detective right now. You are the confused mother who is scared of her own shadow. Make her believe she has won. I dialed Hannah's number. I put the phone on speaker so the recording device Tessa had set up could catch every word. Hannah, I said, letting my voice waver. I don't know what is happening to me. I forgot to pay the electric bill again. I think you were right. There was a pause on the other end. Then Hannah's voice came through, sweet and terrifyingly smooth. Oh, Mom, she cooed. It is okay. I told you I would take care of it. Are you finally ready to let me help you with the legal stuff so you can rest? Yes, I whispered. I just want to be safe. Take me to the lawyer. I knew you would see reason. Hannah said, I will pick you up tomorrow. We will get everything sorted out. When the call ended, Raphael nodded approval. He opened a small black case on the table. Inside lay a pearl necklace and a simple analog wristwatch. This is old school. But it works, Raphael said as he clasped the necklace around my neck. The microphone is in the clasp. The watch has a backup recorder. I have a buddy at the district attorney's office in Lakeside. He knows something big is coming. He is just waiting for the trigger. The next morning, Hannah arrived early. She looked triumphant, dressed in a sharp blazer, ready to close the deal. She drove us toward the city centre, chattering about how wonderful the senior living community would be. I just nodded and stared out the window, playing my part. We need to make a quick stop at Summit Crest Bank before the lawyer, Hannah said, checking her reflection in the rearview mirror. Just to consolidate some accounts. It will be easier for Clay's lawyer to draft the trust if the money is in one place. We walked into the bank, the smell of carpet cleaner and money filling the air. As soon as we entered the lobby, Hannah's phone rang. It was Clay. She stepped away to the corner, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. This was my chance. I walked up to the teller, a young woman with kind eyes. Excuse me, I said, keeping my voice low. My husband, Robert Brooks, had a safety deposit box here. Box number 312. I need to get some sentimental items out. Just old letters. Of course. Mrs. Brooks, she said. I just need your key and ID. I produced the key I had kept hidden on my keychain for years, a small brass thing I had almost forgotten about until last night. She led me into the vault. The heavy steel door swung open with a groan. When I opened the metal box, there were no jewels or gold. There was just a single envelope and a small, silver USB drive. I opened the envelope. It was a letter in Robert's handwriting. Seeing his script made my chest ache. Marilyn, the letter read, if you are reading this, something has happened to me. I have been talking to Clay Mercer about the insurance. He says he can triple the returns if I move things around, but something feels off. He is too eager. If anything looks too convenient for one person, trust your gut, not the numbers. I signed a request to delay the beneficiary change, just in case. It is attached. I looked at the paper clipped to the letter. It was a formal request to hold the beneficiary change for 30 days, dated 2 days before the change was processed. The insurance company had never received it. Clay must have intercepted it. Then I picked up the USB drive. On it, a piece of masking tape read, Meetings with C.M. My hands trembled as I realized what this was. Robert had recorded them. He had suspected Clay was manipulating him, and he had caught it on tape. I could almost hear Clay's voice in my head, slick and predatory. Think about the tax benefits, Bob. If you leave the bulk to Hannah, Marilyn won't be burdened with the estate tax. She doesn't need control to be taken care of. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Raphael. If you find anything, photograph it. Do not take the originals yet. We need them to stay there until the police have a warrant. I snapped photos of the letter and the delay request. I put the USB drive back in the corner of the box, my heart pounding against my ribs. I was not just fighting for my house anymore. I was holding the weapon my husband had forged before he died. I closed the box and locked it. When I walked back out into the lobby, Hannah was just hanging up the phone, ready to go. Mum, she asked, smiling that fake, bright smile. The lawyer is waiting. Yes, dear, I said, clutching my purse tight. I am ready to sign whatever you want. I followed her out to the car, a fire burning in my gut. She thought she was leading a lamb to the slaughter. She had no idea she was driving with the executioner. The lawyer's office smelled of expensive leather and intimidation. I sat in a chair that was too soft, sinking down until I felt small, while Hannah and Clay sat upright on either side of me like prison guards. Across the mahogany desk, the lawyer, a man with a smile that did not reach his eyes, pushed a stack of documents toward me. It was a mountain of paper designed to bury me alive. There was the full power of attorney, the guardianship application, the deed transfer for my house, and the beneficiary modification for my pension. They were stripping me clean, piece by piece. I reached for the pen, making sure my hand trembled just enough to sell the performance. I looked up at Hannah, widening my eyes in feigned confusion. If I sign all of this? I said, my voice thin and wavering. Will you stop worrying about money? Will you be less stressed? Hannah sighed, a sound of practiced patience. Yes, Mom. It is for the best. This way, the state cannot take anything if you get sick. And I will still see Noah and Lily, I asked, letting a tear leak out. You won't send me away where they can't visit? Of course not, Hannah said quickly. I turned my gaze to Clay. The recording device in my pearl necklace felt heavy against my skin. I needed him to say it. But Clay, I stammered. This says, transfer of title. It says the house becomes yours. Does that mean I don't own it anymore? Clay shifted in his seat, checking his watch. He was impatient. Marilyn. Look, Clay said, leaning in with a condescending smirk. Legally, everything will belong to Hannah. That is just how the structure works to protect the assets. But don't worry, we will take care of you. You won't have to lift a finger. It was the confession we needed. He had just admitted on tape that the transfer was absolute, stripping me of ownership under the guise of care. The lawyer cleared his throat and picked up a sheet of paper. We also have the medical attestation here, the lawyer said smoothly. Dr. Aris from St. Alder Memorial has certified that due to cognitive decline, you are no longer fit to manage complex financial affairs. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had never been to St. Alder Memorial. I had never met a Dr. Aris. Tessa was right. They had bought a diagnosis. Hannah reached out and covered my hand with hers. Her palm was warm, a touch that used to bring me comfort. Now, it felt like a shackle. I just want you to be safe. Mom, she said, her eyes shining with fake concern. I am doing this because I love you. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. She was looking me in the eye, using love as a weapon to rob me. I forced a weak smile. I know, I whispered. I trust you. Hannah. I signed the first 2 pages. Then, as I reached the deed transfer, I dropped the pen. I rubbed my temples, breathing heavily. I am so tired, I said, my voice slurring slightly. My head is spinning. I don't think I can read the rest right now. Just a few more signatures. Mom? Hannah pressed, an edge of desperation entering her voice. No, I said, pulling my hand away. I need to lie down. Let's finish this on Sunday. At dinner. We can have a nice family dinner at the house, and I will sign the rest then. Please. Hannah? I just want to rest. Clay looked furious, but the lawyer intervened. If she's under duress or exhausted, the signature could be contested. Better to wait a day or two. Hannah relented. Okay, Sunday dinner. But we finish it then. As we stood up, Clay grabbed Hannah's arm. Make sure you keep her medication, Clay said, loud enough for me to hear. She seems erratic. Give her the pills yourself to ensure she doesn't do anything impulsive. I will, Hannah said. She took the bottle of sedatives from my purse, the ones I was supposed to take for anxiety. She did not know that 2 days ago. I had flushed the real pills and replaced them with harmless sugar tablets. She was guarding a placebo. I spent the night before the dinner in my cheap motel room. My phone pinged with an email from Tessa. The district attorney is ready. But we need one last thing. We have Clay on fraud. We need proof that Hannah knows about the manipulation of your husband's death. We need to prove she isn't just a victim of Clay, but an accomplice. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. The fluorescent light was harsh on my 58-year-old face. I saw the wrinkles, the bags under my eyes, the grey hair. But the woman staring back was not the confused widow they thought she was. Tomorrow, I said to my reflection, my voice steady and cold. Tomorrow, I will let you hear your father's voice, and I will let the whole town hear you answer for what you have done. The smell of roast beef filled the house, thick and savoury. It was Robert's favourite meal. Hannah had cooked it not out of nostalgia, but as a closing ceremony. She had set the table with the good china and crystal glasses, trying to turn her betrayal into a celebration. To her, this dinner was the bridge between her past as a struggling daughter and her future as a wealthy woman. Noah and Lily were placing napkins on the table, laughing about a cartoon. They had no idea that the dining room was about to become a slaughterhouse of family ties. My chest tightened. I could not let them see this. Noah. Lily, I said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. Why don't you two go into the living room and watch that new movie Grandma needs to talk to Mommy and Clay about boring grown-up stuff? Okay, Grandma Noah chirped. I watched them run out and closed the double doors. Now. It was just the three of us. Clay was standing by the sideboard, opening a bottle of expensive red wine. I watched him through the reflection in the hallway mirror. His hand hovered over my glass. He slipped 2 small white pills into the wine and swirled it gently. He thought he was giving me the sedatives Hannah had stolen from my purse. He did not know I had replaced those pills with sugar tablets 3 days ago. Here you go. Marilyn, Clay said, placing the glass in front of me with a snake-like grin. Drink up. It will help you relax before we sign the papers. I took a sip. It tasted like cheap grape juice and victory, 2 blocks away, in a nondescript van. Raphael and a plainclothes officer were listening to every breath I took through the microphone hidden in my pearl necklace. Downtown, in a sterile conference room. Tessa and the district attorney were listening on a secure line. The stage was set. Hannah pushed the stack of documents toward me. Okay. Mom, she said, her voice soft but urgent. Let's get this done so we can eat. Just sign where the yellow tabs are. I picked up the pen, but I did not sign. I looked at the empty chair at the head of the table where Robert used to sit. Do you remember the day your father bought this table? I asked, staring at the wood. He worked overtime for 6 months. He was so proud. Hannah groaned, slamming her hand onto the table. Mom, please, we are not doing this tonight. Stop living in the past. He loved you so much. Hannah, I continued, ignoring her anger, he wanted to protect you. If he wanted to protect me, he would have made more money. Hannah snapped. Now sign the papers. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. It was time. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small USB player I had prepared. I found something of his, I said quietly. I pressed play. Robert's voice, grainy but unmistakable, filled the dining room. Marilyn, if you are hearing this, it means something is wrong. I don't trust Clay. He keeps pushing these schemes. If something happens to me, don't let anyone use my death to make you invisible. Watch the insurance. The silence that followed was deafening. Hannah froze, her face draining of all colour. The glass in her hand trembled so violently that wine sloshed onto the white tablecloth, looking like a splatter of blood. Clay tried to laugh, but it sounded like a bark. This is ridiculous. It is just an old recording of a confused man. Turn it off. But the recording continued. Robert's voice grew harder. Clay Mercer promised me returns that don't exist. He thinks I am stupid. But I know a con when I hear one. Clay's face went grey. The arrogance vanished, replaced by the primal fear of a predator who hears a trap snap shut. I reached down and discreetly pressed the button on my watch, activating the backup recorder. I needed her to say it. I needed the final nail. I looked straight at my daughter. Hannah, I said, my voice steady and cold. The beneficiary form, the fake doctor, the garage. You knew about Clay's plan. When did you know I... Hannah stammered, her eyes darting between me and Clay. The pressure was crushing her. She was terrified, and the nightly sedatives she had actually taken were making her loose. Tell me, I shouted, slamming my hand on the table. I knew Hannah screamed, tears exploding from her eyes. I knew. Okay? But Dad had already signed it. What was I supposed to do? Walk away from $300,000? I just went along with it. I couldn't live my whole life watching you two be poor and dragging me down with you. I deserve a life. The air left the room. She had said it. She had admitted to knowing, to accepting the fraud, to discarding her parents for a payout. Somewhere in a police station. I knew the district attorney had just stood up from his chair. The raid was on. I looked at my daughter, who was sobbing into her hands, and I felt nothing but a hollow, freezing calm. The silence that followed Hannah's confession was shattered by my own voice. I was done whispering. I was done trembling. The mask of the confused, helpless old woman dissolved, revealing the fury of a mother who had been pushed too far. You think I am losing my mind? I screamed, standing up so abruptly that my chair fell backward with a crash. I am the one who found the papers in your bag. Hannah, I saw the petition for guardianship. I went to the bank. I opened safety deposit box 312. Hannah recoiled as if I had slapped her. She tried to stammer a defense, but her eyes were darting around the room, looking for an exit that did not exist. You are making this up? Hannah cried, her voice shrill. You are agitated. This is exactly why you need help. Do not lie to me anymore. I yelled, pointing a shaking finger at her. I know about the account at Summit Crest Bank. I know about the 80% transfer, and I know you forged Dr. Evans's signature because you had to buy a diagnosis from a stranger at St. Alder Memorial. Hannah froze. The mention of the specific hospital killed her denial instantly. She looked at Clay, panic rising in her chest. Clay stepped forward, raising his hands in a gesture of mock calm, but his eyes were hard. "Marilyn, listen to yourself," Clay said smoothly. "The insurance system is unfair. We were just optimizing the family assets. We were trying to make sure the money didn't get eaten up by taxes. We did this for you. Optimizing." I spat the word out. "Is that what you told the people who invested in Everline Apex Holdings? Did you optimize their savings until there was nothing left?" Clay's face went rigid. The polite veneer vanished, replaced by a cold, predatory stare. He took a step toward me, his jaw clenched. "You need to be careful about what you say." "Marilyn," Clay threatened, his voice dropping to a low growl. "You are treading on dangerous ground." Suddenly, the living room doors creaked open. Noah and Lily poked their small heads out, their eyes wide with fear. Grandma Noah asked, his voice trembling, "What is happening? Why are you yelling?" My heart stopped. I could not let them hear this. I could not let them know their mother was a thief. "Go back inside," I shouted, more harshly than I intended. "Turn the television up loud. Do not come out until I tell you." They scrambled back and shut the door. I turned back to Hannah, my hands clenched into fists. "You are letting him destroy us," I hissed. "Dad wouldn't sign the papers," Hannah blurted out, tears streaming down her face. "He wouldn't do it. He kept saying no until—" She stopped, realizing she had said too much, until what I stepped closer, closing the distance between us. Until Clay took his car to the garage, until he paid cash to have the brakes checked a week before the crash. Hannah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked at Clay with horror, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. You said it was just paperwork." "Clay," Hannah whispered. "You didn't say anything about the car." Clay opened his mouth to speak, but 3 sharp knocks on the front door silenced him. Boom, boom, boom. "Police, open up." The door burst open. Raphael strode in, followed by 2 uniformed officers from the Lakeside Police Department. He held a warrant in his hand. "Clay Mercer," Raphael said, his voice grim. "We have a warrant to search this property and seize all financial documents related to the Brooks estate." Clay's arrogance crumbled. He looked from the police to the window, realizing he was cornered. "I want my lawyer," Clay snarled, trying to regain control. "This is harassment." One of the officers stepped forward and held up a printout. "We have the bank records from the Cayman Islands, Mr. Mercer, and we have statements from 3 other elderly victims who identified you from a photo lineup. Save the lawyer for the judge." Clay slumped, his face turning the color of ash. He looked like a fox caught in a steel trap. An officer moved toward Hannah. "Ma'am, we need to ask you some questions in the other room." Hannah looked at me, her eyes pleading. But I stood still as a statue. As they led her away into the kitchen, the dining room felt suddenly vast and empty. I sank onto the chair, my legs giving way. Raphael walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. I looked past him toward the living room. I could hear the faint sound of cartoons playing through the wall. Noah and Lily were laughing at something on the screen, completely unaware that their world had just been dismantled. Tomorrow, I would have to stand in a courtroom and decide my daughter's fate. But tonight, listening to the innocent laughter of my grandchildren while the police bagged evidence around me, I realized the true cost of my revenge. I had won the war, but the battlefield was my own home. The emergency hearing at the Lakeside County Courthouse was a cold, sterile affair. The prosecutor did not hold back. He laid out the recordings from the dinner, the handwritten letters from Robert, the forged guardianship papers, and the link to the other elderly victims Clay had swindled. What had started as a family dispute in a small dining room had exploded into the key piece of evidence for a massive fraud investigation. Hannah's lawyer tried to paint a different picture. He stood up, adjusting his tie, and pointed at Clay. "Your Honor," the lawyer said smoothly, "my client was manipulated by a professional con artist. She signed papers she did not understand. She was just a concerned daughter trying to care for an aging mother who, perhaps, was not entirely clear-headed." The room went silent. Every eye turned to me. I sat on the witness bench, my hands folded in my lap. This was the moment. I could nod, play the role of the confused old woman, and save Hannah from prison. I could say she made a mistake out of love. Raphael looked at me from the back row. He did not say a word, but his eyes asked the question that was burning in my chest. How far does this revenge go? And what is the price? I closed my eyes. The sound of Hannah's voice from that first night echoed in my mind like thunder. "You should have died before Dad." I remembered the whisper through the wall about the nursing home. I remembered the way she looked at me when she handed me the pen to sign away my house, not with love, but with impatience. This was not an accident. It was a repeated choice. "Mrs. Brooks," the judge asked, looking down at me over his glasses, "do you believe the guardianship petition filed by your daughter was accurate? Do you believe you lack the capacity to manage your own life?" I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my spine was steel. "No, Your Honor," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "I am not confused. I investigated this myself. I found the papers. I recorded the conversations. My daughter told me I was too old to understand money. She told me I was a burden. She tried to erase me." Hannah's lawyer looked panic-stricken. "But surely, Mrs. Brooks, you can see that she was under duress. She was trying to help you." I looked at Hannah. She was weeping, her face blotchy and red. But I felt cold. "She was not trying to help me," I said flatly. "She was trying to bury me. She knew Clay tampered with the insurance. She knew the medical report was fake. She forced me to sign property transfers by switching my medication. She made a choice." Hannah let out a wail. "Mum, how can you say that I am your daughter? I didn't betray you." "Hannah," I said, looking her dead in the eye, "I just refused to let you kill me again." The gavel came down. The judge's decision was swift and merciless. Clay Mercer was indicted on 14 counts of wire fraud and elder abuse. He was looking at 20 years in federal prison. Hannah was charged as an accomplice and for abuse of guardianship. It was a lighter sentence than Clay's, but enough to ensure she would spend the next 5 years behind bars, stripped of the freedom she had tried to buy with my life. 6 months later, the dust had settled. I was no longer in the big house in Maple Ridge. I had sold it. Too many ghosts lived in those walls. I sat at a small round table in a rented apartment in Lakeside City. The dinner was simple, just spaghetti and water. Noah and Lily sat across from me. They were quieter these days, but they were safe. The court had granted me temporary custody while their father, an ex-husband Hannah hadn't spoken to in years, worked out the long-term arrangement. There was an empty chair where Hannah used to sit. I had put her plate away in the cupboard. Grandma Noah asked, poking at his pasta. "Why are there only 3 of us?" I picked up my fork. I looked at the empty space where my daughter should have been. I thought about the prison cell where she was sleeping tonight. I thought about Robert and how he had tried to warn me from the grave. Because, Noah, I said softly, as if speaking to myself, this is the number of people who didn't want Grandma to die, so they could live better. I raised my glass of water. It wasn't a toast to happiness. It was a toast to survival. The revenge was complete. The price had been paid. And from now on, every dinner we ate would be served in the shadow of the night my daughter spoke the words that I had spent the rest of my life answering. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on what you would have done in my shoes. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and hit that hype button to help get this story heard by more people. Your support means the world to me.